Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Amy Hollander and I am going to be giving today's lecture on the NIET Rubric subcategory Motivating Students for both my course EDUC 250 and Dr. Vavasor's. So today we're going to be focusing on the subcategory Motivating Students. And by the end of today's lecture, we hope that you can observe a lesson and identify the ways that the teacher is motivating the students using this particular rubric. So the whole point of this lesson is for us to be able to identify, can you organize and present the content in a manner that motivates students to learn? So let's look specifically at what the NIET rubric shows us. So for you to earn a 5 or 4, the teacher needs to consistently organize the content so that it is personally meaningful and relevant to the students. The teacher consistently develops learning experiences where inquiry, curiosity, and exploration are valued, and the teacher regularly reinforces and rewards effort. Now we want you to be able to earn a 3 or higher, so that would be this area, where the teacher sometimes organizes the content so that it is personally meaningful and relevant to students. The teacher sometimes develops learning experiences where inquiry, curiosity, and exploration are valued, and the teacher sometimes reinforces rewards and efforts. So what do you need to know to motivate your students? Well, you're going to need to have an in-depth knowledge of the students that you're teaching. And we talked a lot about that last week, where we discussed ways that we can get to know our students better. We can find out what motivates them in our different areas that we're teaching. I always ask my students to write a science autobiography, where they tell me of a science memory they have that they love and a science memory that they wish they didn't have anymore, so I can understand what it is that my students enjoy about the subject I'm teaching them and what they don't enjoy. So what are some key words to remember with this standard? We definitely have you consider thinking about the word relevant, also inquiry, curiosity, exploration, and also rewards effort. So let's go into a little bit more depth with this particular NIET rubric subcategory. First off, how is this area tied to other areas of instruction? Let's take a look at standards and objectives, which you've already learned. And what you'll notice is that there is an area under standards and objectives that looks very similar to an area under motivating students. You will notice that we want you to make your learning objectives consistently connected to what students have previously learned and know from life experiences and integrated with other disciplines. So what we also want in motivating students is that the teacher sometimes organizes the content so it is personally meaningful and relevant to students. So what we would like you to be able to do is teach the concept that you're teaching in a way where students can identify how to use that concept in their everyday life or explain something that they observe in their own lives. Additionally, under standards and objectives, we see that there's evidence that most students demonstrate mastery of the objective. Under motivating students, we want that teacher to sometimes reinforce and reward the effort. So that means we not only want evidence that the students are trying to learn this concept, but also evidence that you as the teacher are also reinforcing and rewarding the effort for those students trying to learn it. Okay, so let's break down motivation into each of the bullets. So the first one is the teacher sometimes organizes the content so that it is personally meaningful and relevant to students. We want you as the teacher to clearly communicate the purpose of why the students are learning what they're learning. We want the students to be able to understand why the content or skill is being taught and how it will impact their own lives. So this is when we always want to get to know our students and understand them better. An example could be an ELA. Analyze multiple accounts of the same event or topic, noting important similarities and differences in the point of view they represent. Here, you could have your students read a recent historical event and all the different accounts of it. You could also read a story that takes place at their grade level, where maybe 3 different people witness something that happens at school and have 3 different accounts. And then you could compare and contrast that to an event like the abolition of slavery, where you could have a lot of different perspectives. You could have a formerly enslaved individual, you could have someone who owned a plantation, you could have folks who were on different sides of the Civil War. There could be a lot of different ways to do this. But either way, we want to make sure that we're making this information personally relevant. So again, in the area of abolition of slavery, maybe we're looking at the perspectives of individuals that live in our parishes. If we were in class today, we would be doing some group work where you would tell me how you present material to motivate your students. So what I'd like you to do is take a moment and think about how you might try to motivate your students, knowing what you know about this subcategory of the NIET rubric. One way that I do this is I try to use scientific phenomenon that my students see every day. So for example, we talk about ice floating in your drink and then why you can't freeze Coke cans without them exploding. These are things that most of our students have experienced. However, what we are trying to identify is that there's actually a scientific reason or concept behind it. So another part of motivating students is the teacher sometimes develops learning experiences where inquiry, curiosity, and exploration are valued. So let's break down those 3 key terms for this part of the motivating students subcategory. First, inquiry. Active learning that starts by posing questions, problems, or scenarios. How much more fun is it to learn something when you're trying to solve a mystery? Or you're trying to figure out a problem, or you're trying to figure out a particular scenario. And this could be as young as birth to 5 or kindergarten. Maybe little bunny Foo-Foo needs 5 apples to bake his apple pie, but he can only buy 3 from the store. How is he going to get the rest of his apples, and how many will he need? Curiosity. When students desire information without the expectation of external reward. So they want to find out how. Maybe your students start to think about how little bunny Foo-Foo is going to get those apples. Is little bunny Foo-Foo going to need to travel to a different store? Is he going to have to knock on neighbors' doors and start bartering or borrowing apples? And then exploration, when students use a hands-on approach to solve a problem. So how are we going to find out how many more apples little bunny Foo-Foo needs and how little bunny Foo-Foo is going to get those apples? So we want to be able to provide opportunities for students to generate questions, conduct their own research, and explore to locate the answers. A great way to do this is if you do pose a problem to your students, use something like an anchor chart where students can generate lots of questions or solutions and you can write them down and then as a class decide which one you're going to go with. Students love generating their own questions, and that usually leads to increased motivation for them to figure out the answer to their question. And what you'll notice is when we do these things, learning becomes student-directed rather than teacher-directed. So here's an example for 2nd grade social studies. Describe the responsibilities of a citizen in the United States. So first we could open up the lesson with, what do you think makes someone a good citizen? And you could crowdsource your students to come up with lots of different ideas about what makes somebody a good citizen. And then you could say, well, how do you think people came up with the different ideas of what makes someone a good citizen? And then students usually get into laws and rules. And then maybe you could have your students then explore different documents that indicate what makes you a good citizen, or looking at the questions on our citizenship exam. The next part of motivating students is the teacher sometimes reinforces and rewards effort. So we could give our students verbal praise or recognition. We could also put student work up around the room to show excellent work from a variety of different students. Students' work is sometimes used as a model for others. However, we want you to be careful. You want to avoid students simply copying someone else's work. In early childhood and the early elementary grades, you would want to encourage the individual creativity and ideas. These children are still developing the ability to think for themselves and therefore use examples and models very cautiously. So we would want to maybe reward our students for the different ideas they have. For example, if we had our students make a jack-o'-lantern since Halloween is coming, and then you could praise your students for all the different ideas of what they think a jack-o'-lantern should look like. We also want you to acknowledge responses, and this is huge. We want you to have a way to respond if the answer is accurate or inaccurate and explaining why. So if a student gets the answer right, don't just say, that's correct, good job, but say, that's correct. I love how you came up with this idea. And then you explain why the answer is correct so that if students did not get that correct answer, they can understand why that answer is correct. And the same could go if a student doesn't get the answer right. You could say, wow, that's a really interesting answer. Unfortunately, that's not correct. And then you can explain why. Or you could find someone who did get the correct answer and then explain why that answer is correct. We want our students to receive feedback that supports an environment in which students feel safe to take risks and respond to questions. Nobody wants to be afraid to answer your questions. So here's an example of how we can motivate our students using the NIET rubric. In this case, we're going to learn about immigration during the 1860s. In this lesson, which is probably going to be multiple days, we're going to have additional materials, including current newspaper articles on immigrants and refugees moving to the U.S. And then the assignment will be to interview individuals who have immigrated to the U.S. So how is this an example of motivating our students? Take a look at the standards in the box below to the right and think about that for a moment, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so first off, we are using current newspaper articles. It would be even more relevant to your students if you use newspaper articles specific to the state of Louisiana or to our parishes. But if we're doing something that's current today, this is probably something that your students are hearing on the news or being discussed at the kitchen table. And so they're going to be really interested in this. So using something from today is going to be personally meaningful and relevant. Additionally, you are giving your students the opportunity to find somebody who they are going to interview. That means that they have to find someone who has immigrated to the U.S., and this could be a family member, a friend, or a neighbor. And then they get to develop their own questions, which is going to value inquiry. This is also going to provide a real-world application of immigration. How cool would it be if students learned the different reasons why people immigrated to the U.S. in the 1860s and then compared that to the different reasons that they identified through this assignment and then did like a cool compare and contrast project or assignment using this information? What they would probably see is that the reasons why people immigrate haven't really changed over the years. Another assignment could be teaching your students measurement in their math class. The assignment could be design a new school cafeteria applying the measurement skills taught. And then also the teacher is going to bring in a special guest architect to discuss how measurement is used within his or her profession. So think about how this is an example related to motivating students, and I'll give you a moment to think about it. Okay, so first off, every student in your school is going to eat on school property. It's going to either be in the cafeteria or on the quad, but everyone eats at school. So how cool would it be if your students could accurately use measurements to design their dream cafeteria? That would be very personally meaningful to them. Additionally, by the teacher inviting a special guest, in this case the architect, they are showing a real-world application to using measurement in a profession, and they are introducing a profession that the students might be interested in learning about and becoming when they grow up. So again, this is a great way, an outstanding way to show motivation in the classroom. So now that we've gone over the NIET rubric subcategory motivating students, what we would like for you to do this week is to observe a lesson in your area of certification and outside of it in which you identify ways that the teacher promotes motivating students using this NIET rubric category. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys all have a great week.